Hello, everybody, and welcome to the sessions. I'm Cynthia Garrett, and joining me on today's session, right here in the studio, again, some of you may remember her from last season, but she's back with us, and that's Andrea Williams. And you might remember that Andrea is currently CEO of Christian Concern and is also the founder and operating director of the Christian Legal Center, which is a sister organization that serves to actually, if you can believe it, defend Christians in the public sphere and protect the freedom of Christians to be Christians and to live their lives in accordance with their Christian faith. That's kind of shocking, but that's what she does. And to think that that's even necessary in the world that we live in always blows my mind, but it is. And with her in studio today is a current client by the name of Victoria Wasteney. And some of you might know Victoria's case. She's a senior NHS occupational therapist who was suspended for 9 months after giving a Christian book to a Muslim colleague. Victoria then received a written warning following allegations of harassment and bullying by a Muslim staff member. Okay, where do we start? Where do we start? Well, Victoria, before we get to your case, Andrea, I want you to do a better job than I just did, possibly, of really describing what it is that you've devoted your life to.
Yes. Well, Cynthia, you did an amazing job, really, in the way that you introduced it, I have to say, because it is surprising. It really is surprising that the Christian Legal Centre needs to exist, that we in the United Kingdom would need to have a legal body that would help Christians who get into trouble simply for speaking and living out the truth of Jesus Christ in public life, in the workplace. You know, when nurses can't offer prayer and get suspended for doing it, when teachers, for responding to children's questions about the Bible, get suspended because of their answers, then we know that we're in deep trouble. And you know, it started that we would get, you know, there would be the odd case. I'm talking now. Maybe 10 years ago, 10 or 15 years ago, I was a barrister. I am a barrister.
Yeah.
But I was doing these cases would come to me. I was known as a Christian lawyer, and we'd have one or two every now and then. We now have 5 full-time lawyers at the Christian Legal Centre. We have hundreds of calls every year. We're dealing with tens of live cases at any one time. They're going to the highest courts in this country. You know, it's extraordinary, isn't it? It took 13 judges in our country, 13 judges, said that the cross was not a Christian symbol, that it was a piece
then
of
what
jewelry.
is it?
Exactly. and a nurse was told that she had to remove it after 33 years of wearing this cross.
Okay, but see, that confuses me. Is it not a Christian symbol, or is it a Christian symbol? Because you can't have it both ways.
Yeah, exactly.
And if it's not, then the nurse could wear the cross.
Yes. Well, it was, again, in that case, what was extraordinary is that exemptions were made for the Muslim hijab, for the Sikh bracelet and so on, but not for her tiny little cross. But I think what's chilling is the fact that 13 judges put us to proof on whether or not the cross was a Christian symbol. They wouldn't hear from bishops in order for us to... They put us to proof on this. And it took an ex-communist Polish judge sitting in the Fourth Circuit in the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg to say that the cross was a Christian symbol.
That's, oh my gosh. You know the phrase, much ado about nothing? Yes. Honestly, that's like, what do we want to do? Just waste time? So you've seen a complete erosion of Christian rights here.
Yes. And I mean, my testimony would be that I loved Jesus from a very young age, from the age of 4. So really, as soon as I was introduced to him, I could understand what he was all about. I loved him. And then I saw a programme on television when I was about 8, a legal programme. It was called Crown Court. And I said to my mum, when I grow up, I'm going to be a barrister, and I'm never going to change my mind. But now I see that it was God putting into me that desire. Because what he had, what I could never have imagined, and what I could never have imagined even when I was at law school in the 1980s, was that one day I would be defending Victoria, who, for giving a Christian book to a colleague, is found is suspended for gross misconduct. But then even the reality about Victoria's case is that and this is quite similar to a lot of our cases. They begin to get constructed by the other side. So through the disciplinary process, the case against her gets constructed. So what we have with Victoria is Victoria kindly having a relationship with a young colleague,
Right.
very open with her. They had a shared love of human trafficking, and they just began. They had a relationship.
Okay.
And in this context, Victoria gives this book, and she gets suspended. But the point is it's that. But in the process, they begin to say, well, she was a senior staff member. She shouldn't have spoken in this way to a junior staff member.
So now you're a bully.
Yeah.
You've been beating other girls over the head with Bibles.
That's right.
And you really do look like Frankenstein. So, yeah, right. Okay, it's absurd. I get it. But let's go back to this place and time. The NHS is the National Health Organization.
Yes.
Right? So how long had you been working there at the time?
I worked within a health service for almost 15 years. Yeah.
So you were a dedicated employee at least by our standards.
Yes, and a senior employee.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
With an
Okay.
unblemished record.
I had worked in that part of the organisation for 5 years. And the period of time which we knew one another was, I think, in the region of 18 months.
Okay, but they had to know that you were a Christian all the years you were working there.
I think so, yes.
Okay, did you always wear a cross to work or anything, or
No.
share your faith?
No, actually, I had always been a believer, but for quite a long period of time, I was really living like the world. That's the truth.
Saved, but not surrendered.
Right.
Yeah.
But then came an encounter with God,
Yeah.
which changed my life. And then there's no going back. It's all over your face.
And you want to share that with
Yeah.
other. I mean, honestly, I understand that, because the greatest thing that I have to give to anybody comes from my faith, comes from my ability to love others. It comes from my ability not to judge others. It comes from all of that.
I can honestly say, of all the Christian Legal Centre clients, that's what they believe. They have a deep passion for Jesus Christ, and they also believe that he changes and transforms, and they want to tell people about this life-giving faith that makes sense of life.
Well, it's like if you bought a pink Toyota and it was the best car you'd ever had, and it got great gas mileage, and you could drive it everywhere, and the top went down, wouldn't you want everybody that you know and love to have a pink Toyota with a top that goes down? Yes. So I look, I don't want to tell your story for you, but I get it. I mean, you got rocked by Christ, and you wanted to share that with your friends.
Yeah.
This was a Muslim woman.
Yes.
Was she your friend?
We were colleagues. I would say we were friendly. She had been from
She
the
was
start.
a trainee, wasn't she? She'd just come in.
She had
as a
come in
grad-
as a student, and then she'd been appointed into a post, so a junior post. And I would say we'd had conversations. The first conversation that I recall having was she was telling me about the anti-human trafficking charity work that she'd been involved with, which resonated with me because I'd also been involved in some projects with our church, and so we were sharing a little bit about what we were both involved in. So
As
obviously,
people do.
of course, a common goal. So we talked about that, and we had an event coming up, which I invited her to join us at, which she accepted the invitation, didn't think anything more of it. And we'd had some text communication with details about the event and so on. And
So she accepted an invitation to a Christian event.
well, it was actually a charity event.
Okay.
Later, it was kind of portrayed as a Christian event. It was hosted by our church, but it wasn't marketed as such. It was just, it was linked.
And we had all the text exchanges as evidence. They show a very, very cordial, lovely relationship and a very, just a natural, normal.
Yeah. Well,
nice-
she didn't. Yeah, and she didn't say anything to you, or she didn't seem to care who was hosting it.
not at all.
It's just that it was about human trafficking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go on.
And of course, that I'd said it was, I'd been hosted by our church, and that this was who we were, and, blah, blah, blah. And later on, she'd said that someone had overheard that conversation and then came and said, well, she shouldn't be talking to you about this. She's a Christian and you're a Muslim. And at that point, she came to me and said, she was also, this is crazy.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, but the fact that this is going on is, my mind around this. The person who overheard you, were they Muslim or were they Christian?
I would say neither.
Okay, yeah, right.
Because actually, what you do,
Shocking.
because actually, what there is within the workplace, and particularly within the NHS, there's a very hard secularist culture, which actually makes it very difficult to certainly to be a Christian. Islam is greatly tolerated within the public workspace in the United Kingdom. So you'll find prayer rooms and time for halal food, all of this that will be accommodated within the workplace here in the United Kingdom. Christianity is not understood or accommodated in the same way.
Because there's power in the name of Jesus.
But interestingly, the whole secularist agenda, a hard agenda, an unkind agenda, because actually if you dare not to follow everything that flows from that particular agenda, then you find yourself in trouble. So and it seems to be that the Muslims are accommodated, and almost every other group is accommodated.
But not Christian.
But to mention...
Yeah, and I also think it feels for me, and obviously this is a kind of personal perspective, but it feels almost it is generated by a fear that it's not going to be accommodated, and therefore people would be criticised for not having adequate provision, which is understandable, and you would just expect that there would be adequate provision across the board. So in my environment, we would be expected to respond to the spiritual care needs of all service users.
Right.
From all sorts of backgrounds.
Right.
But one of my observations was that it wasn't
Victoria's
taken
working
care
in mental
of.
health, if that...
Okay.
And it wasn't taken care of in the same regard, and there wasn't the same importance placed upon the Christian service users receiving input as our Muslim service users.
Wow. If the greater good is to help patients with mental health issues, then all of the nurses should be equipped equally to meet those needs.
So part of a backdrop to this, and this was why I believe that this girl said you shouldn't be having these kind of conversations, because there had been gossip in the department already, because there had been a supported group set up for Christian service users or anyone who was interested to come. And I had been part of the development of that in partnership with the spiritual care team. And that was because I saw there isn't the same provision, or it's not responded to in the same way. So we put forward a proposal, documented, agreed, top down, every T crossed and every I dotted, because I knew it was dangerous territory. I knew there would be opposition. And of course, in my position, I needed to be neutral. That is my responsibility as a clinician, to make sure that equality is provided for all of our service users. So I had been involved in providing for Eid and Diwali, other celebrations. So I'd been involved in events management for that provision. So equally...
What is Eid and Diwali?
So from other religious backgrounds, they're celebrations, events that they celebrate in a similar way to Easter, a religious event.
Okay,
so what I saw was that there were a number of service users who wanted to celebrate Easter, so we put in a proposal for an Easter celebration, and they had sort of a record attendance. And what I found from the spiritual care team was that they never really had enough support to run a group for those service users. They were expected to meet one-on-one, which was very demanding on their limited resources. So actually the service users were not getting what I felt to be was adequate provision or equal provision to other religious groups. So that was why I formalised a proposal with the spiritual care team and my manager. It was all agreed to, and it was going to be a weekly group, which would be like for a home cell, if you're familiar with home cell.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it would be a celebration. It would be an opportunity to share the gospel. People would have a prayer if they desired to have prayer, praise and worship, and so on. So we managed this, and it was also a social event. And this ran for a number of weeks, and very successfully. We had sort of record attendances. I did an evaluation. All of the feedback was positive. Some of the patients had made a decision for Jesus. Some of them were pursuing baptism, which we were having like dead ends all the time. But
Boy,
people were
Satan
searching
was mad at
he
you.
was mad. He was mad. So there was transformation happening and hope. And I mean, I can probably go back and find it, but some of the guys were like, I have hope that my life can be different.
And of course it can be. I mean, this is the thing, the
Right.
gospel transforms
Yeah,
lives.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely. So this had gone on, but then members of staff had made complaints about that group. So they had escorted service users to come to that group. Then they said, no, we feel pressurised into clapping and singing. And they went on to accuse us of trying to get money from service users. And that was a twisted conversation about one of the service users had asked about the tithe. What is the tithe? What's the difference between a tithe and an offering?
Right.
So, of course, there was an answer. And then they reported that as they're talking about money with the service users. They're trying to get service users to give money. And the homework for the service user was, if you really enjoyed today, go and find someone else you think would benefit from coming next week, which then they said, you're evangelizing, you're proselytizing, you're forcing your religion onto other service users. The service users were so excited about what they were doing, they were putting tracts, biblical tracts, on the walls of the ward, which then they got banned for doing that because it was imposing their beliefs on other more vulnerable service users.
Okay, and you're saying service users, which I guess is a politically correct term for like sweet little people. Who are,
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
like sweet little people, old people, young people, I would assume, some old people.
Adults from 18 to 65 from various backgrounds.
With
It's
mental health
It's
issues.
actually a
Right.
forensic mental health organisation.
Who are getting some joy out of life.
Yes.
Because you introduced Jesus to them.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, now I'm waiting for the huge harm. So,
Okay. So also as my role, actually, as an occupational therapist, is to look holistically at someone's functioning, which
course.
includes spiritual care.
yes.
So it was not like I was acting outside of my remit, but it was, I was accused of.
I think there's a whole list now of cases where nurses, because it does talk about spiritual care, but when people are assessed, so assessed on wards if they're going down for an operation. But again, if a nurse or if someone within the NHS or doctor NHS starts talking about the spiritual backdrop of a patient, if they talk about Christ or if the patient responds,
Right.
we have had suspensions, warnings. Some people have lost their jobs, and I think it's because faith in Jesus Christ is vibrant and real and transformative.
Yeah.
It's not a rule. It's not at these times I must pray or this must be the way in which my food is served,
Right.
which is kind of how the person who doesn't know Christ thinks of it.
Right.
When it begins to actually affect the person, the way in which they're behaving,
Supernaturally.
what then
Right.
happens? Then that is something that there's a sense in which the hospitals or the organisation doesn't really know how to deal with. And I think what was happening with you, where you were, is that this group was vibrant. It was your church was connected.
That's
with
right.
helping to deliver it, and people were seeing quite a lot of change.
And
It's very similar to the case of Joshua Sutcliffe, recently the teacher. He was running a Bible club for 10 months. We were trying to keep him in the school.
He's a student,
He was
right?
he was a maths teacher.
Math teacher.
And he
because you've had a student as
yes,
well.
yes, that's true. But we did have a student. But this maths teacher was so popular was his Bible club that it was running 5 days a week.
Come on.
100 students were coming to this club.
That's called revival,
Yes,
people.
Amen.
That's called revival.
Amen.
But the school didn't want it. The school shut it. The school shut it out. The yoga club was allowed to run. The LGBT stock was allowed to run, but not his Bible club. And so we were helping him to try and get it reinstated.
Did they ever reinstate
They
it?
never reinstated it.
Okay, so
That's a different story. That's a different story.
No,
Back to Victoria's.
no, which leads me because that now the list of because if they're not reinstating them, that means that they're not actually open to the truth or
he's
the
now
love
been-
behind it.
He's now being
Yeah.
removed from the school. I mean,
Right.
So,
Right.
but
So what happened with us, our group came to an end. So it was suspended with an investigation,
Okay.
on these allegations that money was being taken from patients and also they were being, was almost like a terrorism thing, that we were grooming the patients to go and then radicalise the rest of the patients.
This was a terrible term all the time, grooming.
Yeah,
Radical,
yeah.
and it's applied to the
Targeting,
Christians. It's applied to the Christians.
I've got, they don't, because listen, I mean, for anybody watching this session, I have to tell you, I have news for you. There isn't a human being on the planet that can actually target most people and make them believe anything. I mean, people that become parts of cults who maybe could be sort of victimized in the brain, that's a very small number. Most of us, if you're anything like me, we don't trust you anyway, so we don't want to hear anything that a human being has to say. There has to be something intangible that happens inside that is supernaturally divine, and it begins to tug at your heart, and you begin to experience joy. And that sounds like that's what's happening in these situations. Yeah. And that is very frightening and offensive to people who don't understand, and to people who I think are a part of a deeper agenda, which we know as Christians is a deeper agenda. That's bigger than us.
So one of the interesting things I also felt about that investigation was there was prayer. So some people were praying in tongues, and that was raised as an issue.
And what issue was that?
That it was not scriptural, and that was according to the spiritual care team and not necessary.
Oh, so you had cessationists running that for an American, and you have to understand, this is hilarious because it's
yes.
Well, the thing is, and I think when I speak with you, I really want America to understand that this is happening, but I want Britain to understand that it's happening. I mean, I think it's as if the churches still don't believe that this is really happening.
That's why I love having you on.
That I don't know. I used to think that when the first teacher loses their job for offering prayer, when the occupational therapist loses their job for giving testimony, for giving witness, then the church will wake up. The church will wake up and see that something has to change.
We are the sleeping giant.
But we are the sleeping giant. It's as if we've lost our confidence in the gospel, and we don't really, and our confidence to speak truth into society, into people's lives, into institutions. We fail to disciple institutions. Imagine our schools, our education system, founded on Christian principles and precepts, originally delivered by the Christians, originally delivered with prayer at the heart of them.
No, trust me, I get it, and I think that in America, in all seriousness, we were on our way to becoming as politically correct about a lot of things as you are here in England. But a man named Lou Engle organized a prayer rally of 100,000 crazy Christians, and we prayed ourselves right on into a new administration. And as crazy as that man may be, he loves the church. And that's the thing. When you're in tune with the bigger agenda, you realize it's about a bigger agenda. Yeah. It's not about whether your president's crazy or whether your leaders are nuts. It's about a bigger agenda.
Well, what's interesting is that even listening to you here on this sofa today, you're up front. I mean, even the way that you speak about Trump, you're up front. You see, President Trump, you're very up front. Americans tend to be. We're with our British Reserve, but the point about
we're a little loud and bold and too opinionated.
But you have opinions. It's as if we have allowed ourselves. We become
free
a people.
to express
We're not free to express an opinion.
Right.
And in fact, if you don't, it's a cultural Marxism. There is a new morality. There's a new morality that has redefined family, redefined marriage. There's a new morality that defines the box in which you can do God. If you do, it can maybe something be personal to you. Jesus, your friend, just like yoga. If that's just kept at that level, that's all fine. Right. You try and talk about a Christ that makes demands on your life, or is there with the power to change and transform. Actually, that has the keys to eternal life, as we remember Easter. Then that's a whole different order of things.
Well, right. And even within the church, I mean, that's why I feel such a need to equip the saints who have these stories and who are doing this work, is because, as a believer, if you want to live in this state of constant, disillusionment that God doesn't hear your prayers or that there's really no power in it or anything, then just continue to live halfway in and halfway out. It's the going all in with your
Yes.
relationship and your
Yes.
life that actually brings
Yes.
the results.
Yes.
And people don't really want to go all in. And that's the Sunday Christianity mentality that I call it, that really has pervaded a large part of the Western church. We've got to get up. To
Amen.
me, if I'm not going to be all in for Jesus, I'm all out. I'm going back to the nightclubs. I'm going to just go woo, 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 and let my hair down and party like it's 1999 until I die and then deal with it.
That's right.
That's right. Deal with the consequences. But I mean, the power is in the whole enchilada.
That's
and,
right.
And I think, look, Victoria, you got set on fire with the whole enchilada. I'm sure the group got disbanded and never put back together again.
The offer was make it ecumenical, no
Right.
prayer,
Right.
no power, tone it all down,
Right.
then you can come and do it. And of course, the people said, we can't do that. That's a compromise. That is taking Jesus out of this thing.
Right.
We cannot be true to that. So yes,
Yeah.
it was ultimately disbanded.
I want to just, before we go really quickly, was the group before or after you gave the text to the Muslim woman?
That was before. So that was kind of
So
the
her
backdrop
card was
drama.
marked. That's often how it happens as well. The
Okay.
card gets marked.
Okay, your card got marked. Okay, so now they're watching for you.
Mm-hmm.
Big, bad Victoria with the baseball bat, you know?
Yep.
So go to the moment, though, that you gave, and what book was it that you gave her?
I dared to call him father, which was about a journey of a Muslim woman having an encounter with Jesus.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And she was happy to receive the book?
Yes, there was no suggestion at all that she wasn't welcoming the book. She took it and thanked me for it. She was going to be in hospital for a while, so I gave it her because she told me she was going to have a lot of time to fill in. She was very bored. So, and someone had recommended it to me who was also from a Muslim community, and we were talking about it, and she said, you know what, this book is great. Give her this book.
And so how soon after that were you fired?
I think it was probably about a year after that. It was over a period of time. And actually, to be factually accurate, I wasn't fired. So I went through a disciplinary, was suspended, et cetera, After a long drawn-out process, we agreed that there was an agreement where I left.
Okay.
However.
Before you go to the however, I think what we're going to do, because we're out of time for this week, we're going to leave you right there with the cliffhanger. You're going to get the however on next week's episode. Thanks for watching. I'm Cynthia Garrett. I will see you next week with more Andrea Williams and Victoria Wasteney. Hi, everybody. It's me, Cynthia Garrett, and I hope you're enjoying the sessions. And I just wanted to drop in on you and remind you to pick up a copy of my book, Prodigal Daughter, A Journey Home to Identity. I wrote this book because I realized that we are all prodigal kids, you know, and there was a time in my life when I ran off looking for love in all the wrong places and ended up in a world of trouble. But I met my maker and I found my identity in that mess that God turned into a message. So you can go to cynthiagarrett.org and get information about how to get my book online and at booksellers everywhere. I promise it'll bless you.